Thank you for tuning in to the Queen's Court podcast, a space curated for women by women. Here we celebrate empowerment, faith, sisterhood, and growth. So pull up a seat, settle in, and let's step into the rain room together.
Hello, beautiful queens, and welcome to the Queen's Court. I'm your host, Neicey Ford, and I am so glad that you're here for the very first episode. So whether you're tuning in with your coffee, you're driving to work, or unwinding after a long day with a nice glass of wine, know this, you belong here. You have a seat at the table, and it's been waiting just for you. So I want to get started by briefly explaining why I started the Queen's Court. This podcast didn't come to me overnight. It's the result of some deep valleys, some dark nights, and what a dear friend of mine once called my pruning season. And I know some of you listening have probably heard that phrase or term used before. And for those of you who haven't, just think of a gardener who grabs her shears from her she shed and cuts back a healthy rose bush before winter so it can bloom more beautifully in the spring. That's the pruning season. That season for me was one of the hardest times in my life. I had to let go of so much. I had to let go of relationships, including a marriage of several years, close friends, my family, even close friends that I considered family. I felt like I was losing everything: relationships, stability, my sense of direction. I was clinging to things I should have been releasing, holding on to what God was trying to gently and sometimes forcefully remove from my life. There is always one thing that comes to mind when I think about letting go. And you guys have probably seen this image floating around social media where there's this little girl and she's holding this filthy teddy bear, but she's clinging to it for dear life. And in front of her stands a man who is to represent Jesus or God, and he has his hand extended for her to give him the filthy teddy bear, just waiting to exchange it with this gigantic, clean teddy bear with, which he has hidden behind his back. That's how I felt. And actually, that's how I feel all the time when I'm reluctant to let go of something that I feel like God is telling me to release. So I have to tell myself, Neicey, let it go, so God can give you what he has for you, which is always something bigger and better. But let's get back to the pruning. Let me tell you, pruning hurts. It hurts like hell. It's a stripping away. It's literally the death of what was familiar. So it can leave you feeling bare, exposed, and wondering if anything good will ever grow again. But here's the thing. When you come through it, and you will come through it, when you resurface after the pruning, you see that every single cut had a purpose. The growth that comes afterwards, it's richer, it's stronger, it's wiser. I had to learn that pruning wasn't some sort of punishment for the things that I had done, not at all. It was for the preparation and the positioning of me for what was to come. Now, here's another side note about pruning. It doesn't just happen once. Life has many pruning seasons, so some are big and dramatic, others are quiet and subtle. Sometimes you have to repeat a season and the lesson within it, because if you don't learn what God was trying to teach you the first time, he'll lovingly take you back to that same test. And I am evidence. I have repeated several. So I know, believe me. There is also the beauty for ashes moment. During that first deep pruning season, my dear friend told me something that stuck in my spirit. She said, God will give you beauty for ashes. And then she said, straighten your crown. At the time, I didn't fully understand what that meant, but something about it made me pause. I decided to lean into it. I made myself a journal. And for those of you who know me, know that I didn't have to make anything because I have tons of notebooks, pens, pencils, whatever type of writing utensil you might need. I already have it. But this was something special, something different. So I had this pink binder. I copied and printed out a picture of Rihanna where she had both hands placed on the side of her head and she was holding this crown steady. It was such a powerful image to me that I wanted to use that for my journal. So I printed it out, stuck it in the front sleeve of the binder, and it was, I started this 31 days of journaling. So I dug deep into the Bible. I prayed, I wrote, I wrestled with my emotions and my faith. Um, and that was my personal journey of straightening my crown. It was reclaiming my identity, remembering who I was in Christ, and standing in the authority that He gave me. And I was excited because I had gone 31 days straight. 31 days. And then another friend of mine had to bust my bubble. They were a pastor and they said, Neicey, you do know that, because it was kind of like a fasting for me, because I was fasting from some things. And they reminded me, they said, Neicey, you do know that the test typically comes after. So I was on high alert. And baby, when I say I did not want to leave the house because I was like, oh, Lord, what's going to happen now? I was feeling good and accomplished. And I just waited, but nothing happened. And it reminded me again of what they always say about 90% of the things that we worry about never even happen. So that was something that I was kind of glad that didn't come into fruition. My 31 days was great. And what did they say? It takes 21 days to develop a habit. So I did 10 additional days, but it was a good moment. And I felt really good about accomplishing that goal for myself. Out of that 31 days of straightening my crown, I came away with a deeper understanding of myself, of God, and my purpose. And out of my purpose, or out of that purpose, the seed for the Queen's Court was planted. I am always pouring into people. That's just who I am. I go to work and I never know who I'm going to show up as from one day to the next. Yesterday, I was a therapist. Today, I was a counselor. Tomorrow, I might have to be a cheerleader. But whatever I'm needed to be, I have a hat waiting to throw on and assume my position. So many people were telling me that I should write a book with my inspirational posts that I share daily on social media, and I did. The younger ladies at work stated that I should start a group for younger women to share stories and to be of encouragement to one another. And I considered it, but I kept coming back to the straightening my crown. One day, I can't remember exactly where I was, but there was an older woman who was walking. She had come out of the restroom and she was about to walk past me. And I noticed that her skirt was tucked inside her tights. So her backside was exposed. And I immediately, stopped her and said, ma'am, and I don't know why I'm whispering to you guys, but I'm like, ma'am, pull your skirt out of your tights. So she instantly pulled them out. And then she said, oh, Queen, thank you for fixing my crown. And that was another, what does that mean? But I had to think about what the crown symbolized. For her, me fixing her crown could have meant that I helped restore her to a moment of grace. It was like she was saying to me, thank you for helping me when I was vulnerable. You reminded me who I am, a queen. And today, in the world of social media, moments of vulnerability are often turned into entertainment. So if I had let her walk around with her skirt tucked inside her tights, someone could have easily snapped a picture, recorded a video, posted it online, and turned her embarrassment into likes and comments and a quick laugh. But instead of becoming a target of ridicule, she was protected in that moment. When I thought about it later, I realized how much it would have weighed on me if I had have chosen silence over compassion. So the podcast was born from the power of that statement. Thank you, Queen, for fixing my crown. That statement spoke to the unspoken bond between women who support one another with love and grace. It shows how small acts of kindness can restore someone's sense of self-worth. And this podcast was birthed for such a time as this. I have a lot of people ask, who is the podcast for? Well, it's for you if you want to listen. When I decided to do the podcast, my target audience was women. It was for the woman who's been there, or maybe she's there right now, the one holding it together for everyone else, but feeling like she's quickly unraveling at the seam. It's for the dreamer, the doer, the nurturer, the leader, the one who's tired of pretending that everything is okay when she just needs someone to see her. And even for the woman who's in a good season right now, I want to pour into you too, because life has a way of cycling. And just like the Bible says, there's nothing new under the sun. And we all need those moments or, those reminders that we are stronger than our circumstances. Here in the Queen's Court, we're going to talk about the real stuff. We'll talk about the faith, the struggles, the breakthroughs, and the lessons. Some weeks it'll just be us having a heart-to-heart conversation. Other weeks I'll have amazing guests who will pull back the curtain on their journeys, sharing both their victories and their valleys. We'll laugh, we'll cry, we'll heal. And every time, I want you to walk away feeling more confident, more grounded, and more certain of your worth. So here's what I'd love for you to do. Subscribe so you don't ever have to worry about missing an episode. Share the podcast with a woman who needs this space. Connect with me on social media so that we can keep the conversation going beyond the mic. And lastly, I want you to think of this and send me your thoughts. Think of this question, ponder this question, and then send me your thoughts via email to thequeenscourtpod@gmail.com. And on the next episode, we'll revisit the question and I'll share some of your responses. So the question is this: what small acts have you shown your sister to help fix her crown or restore royalty? And then I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the many hats that we wear daily as women, I had wrote a poem and I was invited to speak at an event, and we're actually going to have that on the show, speaking to you about her nonprofit. So I'll share the details of the backstory for that. But I do want to share that poem because a lot of times we do wear many hats and we are tired and people don't see that. So I wrote a poem called "Heavy is the Head That Wears the Crown." And I just want to share that with you guys before we sign off today. At night, she lays in the bed, knees pulled up into a fetal position, tear stains on the pillowcase, gently reminding herself that God counts every tear in her eyes that escapes. She goes to work carrying so many bags, but not literally. Each bag with the name of every person waiting for her to arrive so that they can unload and then she can be coach, mentor, counselor, therapist, problem solver, and teacher. Mental fatigue is worse than physical fatigue, I swear. But her day doesn't stop there. She makes it home with tension in her shoulders, greeted by those who love her most. Now the roles have slightly changed. She's now caregiver, chef, mediator, cheerleader, financial planner, and nurse. But the one thing that she is most of all is exhausted. And she is so exhausted that it hurts. That's why it sometimes takes her a little longer to get out of her car. So she goes in the house and heads to the shower, anticipating the warmth of the water caressing her skin. Tears streaming down her face because tomorrow, she lives to do it all over again. She smothers the woman inside who wants to scream, "I don't want to be here!" But she can't quit. She lets the water erase the evidence from her face as she ponders. Who recharges the charger? Stepping out of the shower, she goes back to her room, turns the covers down, and gets in. At night, she lays in the bed, knees pulled up into a fetal position, tear stains on her pillowcase, gently reminding herself that God counts every tear in her eyes that escapes. She prays to God to give her the strength that she needs to keep her head above water so that she doesn't drown. You may not believe me, but I promise it's true. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. So thank you for being part of this first gathering in the Queen's Court. Again, this isn't just a podcast, it's a movement. And you are part of it from the very beginning. So in our next episode, we'll have a sister join us who's going to talk about having the courage to say yes. So until then, Queen, straighten your crown, and you already have a seat at the table.
Thank you for joining us in the Queen's Court today. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and download so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep reigning with purpose and walking in power.